Hi folks, welcome to the weekend. I trust that you've had a good reading week and that you've been able to get some good science fiction in. And on that subject, what have I been reading? First up was Ender's Shadow by Orson Scott Card, of course. And this is an odd book in some respects, or at least it's an odd concept. Orson Scott Card is essentially retelling Ender's Game, but this time from the perspective of Bean, his friend and comrade in battle school, and in all that follows in the original book. And I say retelling, but it's more really of a reframing. Yes, the events that happened in Ender's Game all still happen, but they're often in the background or not really referred to at all other than, obliquely. So the opening third of Ender's Shadow is dedicated to Bean's extremely hard Scrabble life as a small child, really not much more than a baby, in the slums of Rotterdam. It's about how he survives, how he avoids being beaten up, how he usually anyway, how he becomes influential in the street gang that he becomes part of, and yet still living on the very edge of starvation. The middle third of the book is Bean's experience as a launchy at battle school, his training, his faltering steps to becoming a confidant and supporter in a literal and figurative sense of Ender himself. And Bean overcomes his many disadvantages, at least from an upbringing point of view, with his primary advantage, which is that he is super smart, noticeably so, even amongst a cohort of kids who have very well above average intelligence. And then the final third of the book gives us a Bean's eye view of the final battles, which feature in Ender's Game as well, of course. But importantly, it also tees up the books that follow in the rest of the Shadow Saga, which are not a retelling of events in Ender's Game. They are their own thing. So on the audiobook, there's a nice introduction by Orson Scott Card explaining his logic for writing the book. And then the main sequence of Ender's novels jumps thousands of objective years between the first and the second book. And we don't see any of the fallout on Earth from the end of the war with the Formics. In those books anyway. And as I understand it, that's where the Shadow Saga will focus in the following books. What happens to all of those highly trained children now? So, Ender's Shadow, what did I think? It's been years, probably decades actually, since I read Ender's Game, but I enjoyed it at the time. So I was intrigued by how engaging telling the same-ish story again could be. And to cut a long story short, it really was. Orson Scott Card knows how to tell a story, and this is no exception, I think. Bean is a pretty sympathetic character. He has significant issues to overcome in his life. And I really enjoyed the scenes in Rotterdam, well before he gets into orbit. It all sounds, deliciously unpleasant. Bean is special, and exactly how and why are explained as the book unfolds. That superintelligence came from somewhere, is all I'm saying. And if I stopped to think about it for too long, it did seem highly implausible to me that a 4-year-old could be as articulate and street smart as Bean, however special he's supposed to be, and however difficult his circumstances were. I thought that the sections in the battle school are still really good. There's a little bit of practice and so on that featured large in Ender's Game, but Card doesn't repeat sequences for the sake of it. Most of the time is spent seeing Bean develop as a character to earn some respect from his fellow launches. And I enjoyed spending time in Bean's head. And it's fun to see the degree to which, and the methods used by Bean to make it possible for Enders to succeed. And I found myself wondering whether Orson Scott Card always knew that was the case, or if he retrofitted Bean into a more rounded character for the Shadow books. I haven't actually read all of the original Ender series yet. I only got as far as Speaker for the Dead, which I did love. So I don't suppose I'll rush to read the rest of the Shadow series, although I do hear that it's a better read all round than the original series. So we'll see. I do have plenty of other books on my shelves, so like I say, I shan't be rushing. But I did enjoy this one, so I certainly wouldn't rule out moving on to the second one at some point in the not too distant future. And next I read Be Speaker by Adrian Tchaikovsky. It's a relatively new book from him. I wasn't actually planning to read this next, but Ender's Shadow finished well before I finished my long run last Saturday. And so I needed something to move on to. And this I happen to have available to me via Spotify. And it's on my reading list for November anyway, so I piled in. Although, having said that, actually, my 3 hours that I get for audiobook listening with my Spotify premium account ran out with an hour or two left of my run. So I actually ended up finishing this, for the most part, in physical book form that you see before you now. So this is the third book in what I suppose we should now call a series that started with Dogs of War in 2017 and then continued with Bearhead in 2021. And both of those books involve bioforms, and so does this one, which are engineered animals that are upgraded to human-like intelligence, some more than others. In Dogs of War, the action is with a 4-person special ops squad made up of a bioformed dog, a bear, a swarm of bees, who's a distributed intelligence to all intents and purposes, and a so-called dragon, which is a mixed bag of reptile components. All of them heavily armed and all of them programmed to kill. And then there's a jump forward a number of years, maybe a decade or two, in Bearhead, which is mostly set on Mars, where Honey, who's also the bear from book 1, is now downloaded into the head, for reasons that become apparent when you read the book, into the head of a worker who's busy helping to build a new domed city on Mars. And in Beast Speaker, we've moved on even more, maybe even a couple of hundred years from the events in Bearhead. We quickly learn that Mars has done all right for itself, making progress with terraforming and bootstrapping an entire economy into existence, with the somewhat grudging help of the resident portion of bees. And they've needed to, because the Earth has gone dark. It's suffering some kind of collapse, which has knocked it back into, it seems, something approaching medieval feudalism. But a faint signal is detected from Earth, essentially a request for help, ostensibly coming from another instance of bees. The distress call is answered by Mars in the form of a 4-person team who land on Earth, ready to help. Each of these Martians is a twice modified human or bioform, firstly modified to exist on Mars, and then further augmented to survive an extended trip on Earth with its higher gravity. The team is a bioformed dog called Wells, a dragon sniper called Ire, and 2 more or less regular humans, Ada and Takuma. So they home in on the signal, they land, and then things quickly go completely pear-shaped as their naive plan to help an entire planet, with just 4 of them, dissolves in the face of, let's call them, local realities on the ground. So Beast Speaker begins with one of the 4 Martians already dead, and with a monk from the local apiary delivering puppies to the factory, capital F, being tracked by the dragon sniper in chameleon form and therefore invisible. There are relics in this world of a high-tech old, capital O. These exist, much of it non-functioning now, as you might expect 200 years later, but a rare item does still work. And the factory still has the ability, albeit somewhat degraded, to turn puppies into dog bioforms, all controlled by an unseen entity called Factory Admin. So I really love this book, and if pushed, I think I would say I liked it even more than Bearhead, and it might possibly even give Dogs of War a run for its money in a fair fight. I would say that, like the other books, Beast Speaker is written in such a way that it can be read on its own. So if you haven't read the others, you could jump straight into Beast Speaker. Personally, I do think it's better having the first 2 under your belt, which is what I've done. Just having that context makes sense of some of the back references that are in this book, Beast Speaker. Regular viewers will know that I'm fond of an end-of-the-world tale, and there are definitely strong elements of that in this book, with at least the local society in the area that the Martians land on Earth having regressed into a patchwork land of factions, battles and bunkers, witches even, and priories. The world has very much moved on, with the monks of the apiary channeling their inner Leibowitz, preserving the knowledge of the old under the apparent protection of yet another swarm of bees. Some of the relics of the past are quite surprising, if relatively few in number, including one that featured somewhat in the first 2 books that I'd kind of forgotten about. As you might guess from the title and the cover art, bees features large in this book, although mostly, I must say, in the last third of the book. Perhaps not in the way that you might expect if you're familiar with the other with the preceding 2 books. Notably, the women of this tale are excellent. There's quite a good mix of characters. There's Ada and Wells from the Mars team. There's the witches and the wives of the leaders of one particular bunker faction, the power behind the throne there, as it were. Yeah, all of them conspiring quietly to make the bad situation slowly less bad, less uncivilized. A couple of ex-billionaires pop up who back in the day were extreme longevity nuts that have successfully tweaked their bodies while it was still possible to do so, and have endured 200 plus years of chaos, losing their marbles to a very great extent in the process. And there's a brief discussion, which I really enjoyed, about how such an immortal can safely live in their post-collapse bunker without their bodyguards and other staff or their children turning against them and taking it for themselves. And let's just say that a novel solution to that issue is woven into this story. I really like the 3 remaining Martians, particularly Wells the dog, and Ire the dragon, who in particular can regulate his body temperature, running hot and fast, but without much control, mainly instinct, or cool and slow with plenty of time to think, but no longer able to directly participate, and all points in between. And Ire also happens to be a bit of a sarcastic joker, and I like the banter between Ire and the rest of the squad. Beast Speaker really is a tale of unforeseen, unintended consequences. It's an adventure. It's a post-apocalyptic tale. It's a mission. It's a series of bluffs and double bluffs, and of eventually coming together to fight a common foe. And there's an awful lot going on. And to deal with the fact that there's so much going on, the story is told through a rotating set of points of view characters, which by now is a fairly common narrative technique. But because the chapters are quite short, it's maybe a tiny bit jarring, but until you get your eye in. I didn't find that at all problematic, and I generally enjoyed seeing events unfold through those different points of view. Some the local baseline humans, and some not. Tchaikovsky, of course, knows how to tell a good story, though I have found that his books can be a bit variable in quality, albeit definitely, generally speaking anyway, at the good end of the scale. And I suppose I would say that this one, Beast Speaker, is one of the better ones, and I certainly had a great time with it. So if you haven't read it, then I'll definitely recommend getting it after you've read the first two, would be my suggestion. So tell me, what have you read? Is there anything that you particularly recommend? Then do let us know in the comments down below. Or if there's anything that you particularly think we should avoid because you hated it, it's equally valuable to know. Channel stuff next then. Subs are at 6,732, which is up 25 or so since the last one of these last week. And if you're one of those 25, or if you've just stumbled across my channel drunkenly on a Friday for the first time, then a huge welcome to you all. I'm John, and I focus on collecting, reading and waffling on about science fiction books, old and new. Comment of the week this week was from Andrew, who, being a bit partial to a space opera, really liked the sound of Slow Gods by Claire North. He's also reading Alistair Reynolds' new book, Halcyon Years, which he says has a hard-boiled detective vibe about it, but set on a spaceship. And I was immediately struck, and Andrew had the exact same thought, by similarities to Century Rain, another Alistair Reynolds book, which has some similar elements running through at least the early part of that book. Thank you to Andrew for taking the time to leave a comment on the video, and to all of you that do the same. I do really appreciate it. So what was on the channel during the week? Not a lot. There was a rather, I confess, rather hurriedly put together overview of Chris Beckett's back catalogue, whose books I've been collecting over the last year or two and reading. And more importantly, perhaps, Beckett's work I would characterise as thoughtful and very human science fiction, very light on the tech and the spaceships, and very heavy on the relationships, the myths that we build, and the tone of life in general. So that was your lot for this week. On the book buying front, a couple of books have found their way to me this week so far, including two rather nice signed slipcase editions from PS Publishing, which I got via their PS2 special offer page. And I thought pretty good deal. So the to be all pile at the moment is just the two books for now. Anyway, I do have several more that are winging their way to me at some point. So let's take a quick look ahead. On Sunday will be November's book haul. That's quite a good one, I think, with some good used book shopping. And that's the only thing I can absolutely commit to. That's recorded, it's edited and uploaded, so that will definitely happen on Sunday. And after that, we'll just see. So what will I be reading in the coming week? I will be finishing off The Prestige by Christopher Priest, and I'm almost finished it. There's not very much left to go, maybe 50 pages or so, and I thought I might have it under my belt before recording this, but not quite. Suffice to say, at the moment, I'm loving it. I'm a little bit full of regret that I've seen the movie first. I think this would have been even better if you hadn't seen the movie, but there's much joy to be had, even if that is the case. So I will talk about this more next week. I'm also listening to... on audiobook, Absolution Gap by Alistair Reynolds. This was not on my planned TBR pile for November, but, fuck it, I'm doing pretty well. And I'm gradually working my way through a reread of all the Revelation Space books. And, inevitably there'll be a video at some point. So I'll just plough my way through Absolution Gap over the next week or two. I had intended to read this during the week just gone. I read Beast Speaker instead, so I'll pick this up as soon as I finish The Prestige, which will be imminently, I think. And after that, I want to read 400 Billion Stars, Paul Macaulay's debut novel, bit of hard SF/space opera. I've had a couple of people tell me that they found this to be quite difficult and even DNF'd it. But equally, I know of other people who think it's great. So I'm going to give it a go. I don't mind a bit of hard SF. It is a debut novel, and I suppose there's a danger that any author, if it's their debut, hasn't quite honed their skill from a storytelling point of view. So I don't know if this will suffer from that. I don't know. So let's see. And that is everything. Thank you, as always, for watching. Have a wonderful weekend. And until next time, goodbye for now.